The pilot gave a primal scream, a half-war cry, half-terrified bellow, as his aircraft plummeted downwards in a full nosedive. The F-35 was speeding furiously, directly, vertically, and unstoppably down, in a race to meet the ground, which looked as if it was rushing closer by the second, like an oncoming, unstoppable wall. But Lieutenant Colonel Rams Jodes hadn't lost control of his fighter jet. He was still flying with the same poise and precision he'd gained from his years' worth of experience in the cockpit. He was intentionally making the F-35 drop straight down towards the dirt. What on earth could cause a highly trained and decorated military professional to undertake such a reckless, life-endangering course of action? Well, far more insane than Lieutenant Colonel Jodes' alarming flight patterns was what was clinging to the outside of his fighter jet. The real horror was clawing at the wing, its screeches of fury drowned out by the sound of the F-35's engine. Almost. A fist of elongated, claw-like fingers pounded at the glass dome surrounding the cockpit, with the single-minded task of killing the human piloting this metal contraption as fast and as violently as possible, before the jet collided at full force with the ground below. That unexplained passenger was none other than SCP-096. Lieutenant Colonel Jodes hadn't seen how the monstrous mass of elongated limbs had gotten aboard his fighter. It was as if it had appeared there in the blink of an eye. Seeing its wide-jawed, grotesque expression creeping into view in the corner of his eye, beyond the cockpit glass, had caused him to yank hard at the plane's joystick, causing a violent, sharp swerve. The aircraft tilted as the creature howled and thrashed outside, its emaciated body battered by the extreme G-force. But still, SCP-096 didn't relinquish its clawed grip on the plane, even as Jodes regained control and turned the unplanned swerve into a full-on, dizzying barrel roll in an attempt to shake the creature off. No matter how sharp, sporadic, or fast the movements the Lieutenant Colonel made, nothing could get SCP-096 to let go. Which had led to this: the United States Air Force pilot bringing his aircraft into a plummet directly down, almost like playing a game of chicken with the creature still clinging to the wing. It was all about to come down to who would break first. Would SCP-096 let go, expecting the pilot to go through with this insane scheme of crashing headfirst into the ground? Or at the pivotal second, was Jodes about to? He couldn't go through with it, and wrenched the fighter jet's joystick back as hard as he could, with all his strength feeling the plane itself juddering as the sudden change in direction caused the wind and external forces to start hammering at it. The sharp change flung SCP-096 backwards, but it wasn't thrown clear from the jet at all. Instead, its claws scraped at the metal surface, dragging itself closer to the cockpit. As he brought the aircraft level again, Lieutenant Colonel Jodes tilted his head up and saw the haunting face of the monster above him, enraged and about to try and tear its way into the cockpit. But this was an F-35A Lightning II, one of the United States Air Force's most advanced combat aircraft. Surely a multi-role fighter like this, one designed for air superiority, strike missions, and stealthy reconnaissance flights, could hold its own against one shy guy. Or could it? The initial plan was to go with the brute force approach. By some means, possibly by accident or through some intentional scheme by an unknown party, SCP-096 has broken free from Foundation containment. And for whatever reason, maybe they were all on a smoke break. At the same time, the SCP Foundation's own security staff and mobile task force operatives have been unsuccessful in recapturing the anomaly and are now seeking alternative methods to neutralize it. The longer SCP-096 is out of containment, the more risk it poses to people potentially seeing its face and activating its murderous rage state. So the Foundation is forced to either communicate with the Global Occult Coalition, the United Nations dedicated anomalous destruction experts, or contact their own assets embedded within the United States Armed Forces. This is necessary in order to dispatch something that can subdue SCP-096 from a distance, but also potentially while avoiding looking directly at it. By now, the Foundation has had years to figure out ways of tracking down SCP-096 without the need for establishing visual contact. Through the use of surveillance equipment and satellites orbiting the Earth, They're able to use audio recording devices to detect the Shy Guy's distinctive screams and triangulate its position to an isolated mountain range near the Almagen Island High Point on the northern Mariana Islands. Knowing that's an unincorporated territory of the United States means the Foundation can requisition and dispatch an F-35 Lightning II fighter jet to the location without causing an international incident. The pilot, one Lieutenant Colonel Rames Jodes, straps in and takes flight. His F-35 loaded for bear with the latest weaponry. His instructions are passed down from the SCP Foundation through the chain of command, and everything about the anomalous nature of SCP-096 is kept strictly need to know. All that Jodes is told is that this is a combat mission, and that he is to deliver the fighter jet's payload immediately to the coordinates provided by the Foundation. He's ordered, mandated in fact, to not wait for visual contact of a target. Highly unorthodox, but necessary when your enemy can move at the kind of anomalous speeds that SCP-096 is capable of. Now, dependent on which of the arsenal available to the F-35 Jodes deploys, the outcome of this scenario could go very differently, and very badly for SCP-096. The F-35 can be outfitted with a payload of Joint Direct Attack Munition, or JDAMs, which refers to a guidance kit that converts normally unguided bombs, sometimes referred to as dumb bombs, into precision-guided munitions. These JDAM-equipped bombs can be dropped from an F-35 in any weather conditions, and use an integrated inertial guidance system connected to a GPS receiver to hit their targets. This wouldn't necessarily allow the F-35 pilot to score a direct hit against SCP-096, but since he'd be working off coordinates alone, using JDAM-equipped explosives would mean that a bombing run over the area where the anomalous creature is located would be more accurate than a more scattershot attack. The same effect could also be achieved with paveways, laser-guided bombs that can also be carried by an F-35. Depending on the blast radius, having these explosives dropped almost directly on top of it could cause SCP-096 severe harm. While the creature is known to be impervious to most conventional weapons, there is a chance that the 18,000-pound weapons payload of an F-35 could do the trick, leaving enough damage to not only prevent the anomalous creature from regenerating immediately, but also decimating the surrounding area too. Speaking of which, should the bombing run fail to destroy SCP-096 outright, then the resultant devastation to its surroundings could also do the trick. Being situated so close to a mountain when Lieutenant Colonel Jodes drops the F-35's JDAMs-equipped bombs could put SCP-096 at the risk of being caught in a subsequent landslide, unless someone happened to observe it, allowing the creature to anomalously zero in to their location. SCP-096 would struggle to outrun the sheer mass of rocks and dirt that could come careening towards it following an F-35 bombing run. This would likely result in the Shy Guy being buried alive. However, let's say that instead of dropping guided bombs on SCP-096, Lieutenant Colonel Jodes tried to use the F-35's other armaments, like its surface-to-air missiles. Since 2022, defense contractors L3 Harris Technologies, Lockheed Martin, and Northrop Grumman have been developing the Stand-in Attack Weapon, or SIAW, on behalf of the United States Air Force. These missiles would sit inside the internal weapon bay of an F-35 Lightning II like Lieutenant Colonel Jodes's. While stand-in attack weapons are designed to have a shorter range than stand-off weapons, they can be fired from an F-35 once it has breached an enemy's airspace, and are perfect for attacking large movable targets like large ballistic missile launchers, GPS jamming platforms, and anti-satellite systems. In short, an SIAW would certainly pack enough of a punch to blow SCP-096 to pieces. There is just one problem with that plan of attack. In order to fire an SIAW missile at SCP-096, Lieutenant Colonel Jodes would have to be looking at his target, or at the very least aiming through the F-35's onboard targeting system. So the moment he had SCP-096 in his crosshairs and launched a missile, the creature would have already blinked out of the path of the oncoming attack. The same problem would occur when using the F-35's mounted 4-barrel 25mm GAU-22A rotary cannon. While this weapon might be able to fire almost 3,300 explosive armor-piercing rounds per minute, it's still one that requires the pilot to see where he's shooting. And even someone as experienced as Rames Jodes isn't about to fly an F-35 blindfolded, even if it means taking down the Shy Guy. Even some of the precision-guided gliding bombs that could be launched from the F-35 would be unable to hit SCP-096 without looking directly at the creature. Sometimes called smart bombs, guided munitions are designed to hit a specific target, with increased lethality while also minimizing the collateral damage surrounding said target. But whether launching an AGM-154 JSOW, a GBU-39 small-diameter bomb, or a GBU-53B Stormbreaker from the F-35, the avionics required to guide these explosives would still require direct visual contact with SCP-096, allowing it to escape and possibly even attack before being caught in the blast. There is, however, a fourth option, quite literally, the nuclear option. An F-35 fighter jet can carry a B-61 Mod 12, a thermonuclear weapon. Being a gravity bomb means that the B-61 wouldn't require any guidance or visual contact with SCP-096 in order to deploy. Lieutenant Colonel Jodes could simply make a flyby, drop the weapon on the creature's coordinates, and continue zipping through the sky in his F-35 without changing course. The impact would likely vaporize SCP-096, save for its seemingly indestructible bones, in an instant, depending on how close the creature was to the B-61, and the subsequent nuclear detonation would destroy everything for several miles. But that's not what happened. Racing through the air, still with SCP-096 latched onto his aircraft, Lieutenant Colonel Jodes was desperately still trying to shake the creature from the outside of the F-35. It had been unable to claw its way inside the cockpit, but the pilot could hear and see that this had only enraged it further. He knew that it would only be a matter of time before the creature figured out that it could bring the whole plane down by attacking the engine, and diving had already failed. So it was time to try climbing. He angled the speeding F-35 upwards and rocketed up into the sky. It shot upwards at Mach 1.6, roughly 1,200 miles per hour, with the shrieking SCP-096 on the back of the fighter jet. Jodes kept his eye on the altimeter as he climbed. 10,000 feet, 15,000. Knowing he had to push the F-35 to its absolute limit. It would make it to a maximum altitude of 50,000 feet, and that after only 20,000, the air would start thinning. Human beings might struggle to get sufficient oxygen at that altitude. But what about SCP-096? It might not have been human, but it still needed to breathe. 20,000 feet passed by, then 30,000. In the cockpit, Jodes knew that he was now entering an elevation that human breathing wouldn't function at. If it wasn't for the F-35 protecting him, he would be dead in a matter of minutes. But still, he kept up the climb, breaking through the clouds and pushing up further still. The altimeter read 40,000 feet, then ticked closer and closer to 50,000. Outside, SCP-096 had been gripping the F-35 with all of its anomalous strength, but the air had started to thin. It struggled to take in oxygen, gasping through its lungs that were already aching from the continuous screams as it rode the back of the speeding aircraft. There was so little oxygen this high up that the shy guy quickly started to become woozy. 50,000 feet. Lieutenant Colonel Jodes suddenly noticed how quiet everything was so high up, and that the creature had gone quiet too. He looked over his shoulder through the slightly fogged glass of the cockpit. SCP-096 was gone. The warning lights on his dashboard told him that he needed to take the F-35 back down to an acceptable altitude, and he immediately took the fighter into a dive, assuming that the anomalous monster had lost consciousness from lack of oxygen and fallen off the aircraft, plummeting back down to Earth. An assumption that couldn't have been more wrong. SCP-096 was back on the F-35, clawing savagely at the engine, tearing through metal with its bare hands in a fit of rage. Alerts blinked and wailed inside the cockpit as the creature tore open the engine, ripping to pieces the F-135 afterburning turbofan. SCP-096 was so angered that the turbine's inlet temperatures of 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit was barely felt as it wrenched out any component its clawed hands could reach. There was no other option. Lieutenant Colonel Jodes knew it was time to bail out of the F-35 and let it crash. He already lost propulsion from the engine. All he could do was angle the fighter as it started to lose altitude and listed towards the mountain. He pulled the emergency handle that sent the glass dome around the cockpit bursting off of the F-35, and his seat ejected from the aircraft, only to be caught by a large clawed hand. SCP-096 grabbed the pilot's ejector seat with one hand, struggling to hold onto it, as well as keep itself on the back of the F-35 with its other hand. Lieutenant Colonel Jodes was strapped in, He could barely swing kick his legs to get the creature to relinquish its grip. The plane was tumbling out of the sky with a dizzying spin, barreling out of control so wildly that Jodes could hardly see straight. The sky and the ground kept swapping places, flipping over each other so fast that they became a blur. And on the plane's back, tethering him to the crashing F-35, the Shy Guy screeched, as if it was telling the pilot that the pair of them were going to die together. Lieutenant Colonel Jodes screwed his eyes shut and used his fingers to find the pull cord for his parachute. The chute billowed out, the force of the wind snatching him and his ejector seat so suddenly that Jodes was freed from SCP-096’s grip and careened wildly through the air. The F-35 disappeared underneath him as he tumbled, a mess of pilot, parachute, and chair all strapped together. Lieutenant Colonel Jodes struggled to right himself in free fall while tied to the chair, heart racing, the only thought in his head being the impending fall. If the chute broke or came loose in the commotion, then he'd still be good as dead. But a sudden pull forced the pilot upright, the chute catching the wind at just the right angle, enough to steady Jodes and put him in a shaky but controlled descent. He frantically reached for and grabbed the lines to guide the chute, steadily sinking towards the ground below. As he got lower, he saw the F-35 spiraling out of control, heading right towards the foot of the nearby mountain. What sounded like a distant scream from SCP-096 rang out a second before the fighter jet crashed, hitting the mountain and exploding. Around 18,000 pounds of jet fuel erupted into an enormous fireball, with SCP-096 right in the middle of it. That crash alone had just set the United States Air Force back on a fighter jet worth $109 million and neutralized one of the SCP Foundation's most dangerous anomalies simultaneously in one fell swoop. Jodes angled his descent towards the flaming wreckage of his fallen fighter, knowing that a rescue party would likely be sent out to retrieve him. Their thermal imaging would struggle to pick up one missing pilot, so he opted to stay close to the fires, to better his chances of being spotted when rescue arrived. He landed gently and unclipped himself from the ejector seat, then hiked the rest of the way to the burning remains of the plane he'd crashed. There was hardly anything that could be salvaged from the wreckage, and Jodes foresaw a demotion from his current rank of lieutenant colonel and a severe reprimand in his future. And that was the best-case scenario. But then he noticed something, or rather noticed not noticing something. The fireball was still raging, causing huge plumes of smoke to billow out from the destroyed plane, which made visibility difficult. But Jodes was certain that there wasn't a body among the wreck. Then a twig snapped underfoot behind him, followed by the sounds of an exhausted but angered creature. The pilot couldn't bring himself to turn around and face it, but he knew SCP-096 was now standing right behind him. Now go check out SCP-096, look at a picture of Shy Guy in Space, the Shy Guy Questions and Theories, and the Plane That Never Was, SCP-787, for more.